Joining me now is Sherrilyn Ifill, endowed chair in civil rights at Howard University and former president and director counsel of the Legal Defense Fund. Sherrilyn, my friend, thank you for being here. When I heard that clip of that guy who is one of the authors of Project 2025, essentially issue a violent threat against Americans, I had two thoughts. Thought one, he ain't going to do nothing violent. He'll be at a country club somewhere golfing while the real violent people, the armed people, the Proud Boys types do the actual dirty work. So that man is a coward, and he likes to talk a lot of crap, but it is still a threat. And I took it as a declaration of war against the rest of us. How did you take it?
Well, the gloves are obviously off, and they are no longer afraid to say what their true intentions are. When I heard it, though, Joy, what it made me was angry in a very particular kind of way. I'm not sure who these people think they are, but the idea of some second American revolution, they are the Confederacy. They don't get the title of American Revolution. They are the Confederacy bent on destroying this country. And if they think that what we have gone through, certainly as black people in this country, as women, as gay people, as the disabled, as people who are poor trying to find their way up to make their children's lives better than theirs, if they think that we are about to throw that all off and knuckle under to the likes of Stephen Miller and this man and Donald Trump, they have got to be kidding. I am also from Queens, and I can tell you the Donald Trumps of the world, we understood exactly who they were when I was growing up in Queens. And no matter how much money he had, he was not fit, not worthy of the kind of love and attention that these people have lavished on him. We will not go back. And so I think what's important, Joy, is for people to we have to stand in our power. And the idea that this person feels empowered to threaten us publicly in this way and that we don't respond. You know, today, most of the media, thank you for your show, Joy, is focused on President Biden and his age and, you know, whether they have been deceived about his health and so on and so forth. Not the fact that someone who is fully locked in with the Republican conservative right-wing movement is threatening us, not with whether or not the United States Supreme Court has decided that the rule of law no longer exists because the president exists outside of it. He is no longer covered by the rule of law as we all are. So these are powerful threats to our democracy that we should be talking about. And the way we show them that we are unafraid is that we step right to them and we make it clear that it's not going to happen. And that's going to take some strategy and some work, and we have to start talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, on the night of the debate, I got all the texts. I reported them dutifully on the special on MSNBC, what people were saying to me. People are still saying a lot of the same things. Those conversations are happening in the back. But let me tell you what keeps me up at night. Not Joe Biden being old and walking real slow and shuffling and being doddering. You know what keeps me up at night? The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 saying they're going to expand presidential power to confirm John Roberts' edict that the president is a king. The idea that they're going to just deconstruct the administrative state, meaning putting 50,000 civil servants on the street unemployed. They're going to reverse the FDA approval of abortion medication, condemning women in blue states to also an abortion ban. They're going to reverse the interpretation of the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Acts, meaning women will die in the emergency room if they need abortion care. They'll block gender-affirming health care so parents don't decide what to do with their own children. They decide. They'll eliminate the EPA Enforcement Office, meaning we will choke on smog because the Koch brothers want. They'll dismantle the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, meaning we won't know when a hurricane is coming. Beryl is literally going to where my godmother is in Jamaica. They will eliminate the Department of Education. I could go on, Sherrilyn. What keeps me up at night and the reason that I can't dedicate the limited time we have on this show to doing the debate about should Biden be replaced or should Vice President Harris take over, that's not what keeps me up at night. Biden being old is just a fact. This keeps me up at night, Sherrilyn. And I wonder, how do we get Democrats to stop circular firing squad and focus on this?
Well, I think part of what is disturbing me is the Democrats who are engaged in this misguided conversation right now are those perhaps whose lives will not be fundamentally changed by us becoming not a democracy anymore, except they won't be able to say the kinds of things that they now can say when they sit in the briefing room of the White House. They will be in a very different situation in relationship to the president and the federal government. But there are people who will truly suffer. Our country will truly suffer if just even a part of that list you just described is able to be brought to fruition. It will mean the end of democracy in this very young country. And that will mean pain for millions of people. So, like you, I cannot spend time on President Biden being 81 because I knew he was 81 before he started the debate. I was worried about him, but the next day he seemed fine. We saw him at the D-Day ceremonies. We saw him do the State of the Union. We saw him the day after the debate. We saw all of those things. And if there's information that we need, we'll get that information and cross that bridge when we get to it. But right now, we have to understand and organize that this year is about voting for our survival as a democracy. After we get past that, after we have vanquished the danger that stands in front of us, then we can begin to talk about the other things that we need to do to make our democracy stronger, including changing the Supreme Court, including closing loopholes in the Senate like filibuster, and all of these things that actually also stand in the way of true democracy in this country. But we better wake up. We are not in some position where it can't happen to us. It can happen to us. It is happening to us if we look at the Supreme Court's decision the other day. And so we need to get straight and get focused. These people are so emboldened. They have written down their intentions. They have a playbook. They have a day one plan. They go agency by agency in this report to try and dismantle the very things that protect us. What do people think the federal government does? It protects us. That's what the Civil War and the 14th Amendment was all about, was that we needed to recalibrate protection in this country. And we're supposed to be protected by the federal government, whether it is agencies that protect us against unsafe products or unsafe drugs, or whether it's the Justice Department that protects us against rogue police officers and police departments. That's what they want to dismantle, so that they can have their way with us and leave us to the will of the states. And we've got to be prepared to recognize what that is, focus, and fight back against it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why, Rashad Robinson, like you, he calls them neo-Confederates, because clearly that's what they are. We've seen with this Supreme Court, given who they are, you've seen in Louisiana them erect the 10 Commandments in every school. You've seen in Oklahoma, the 50th worst state in the union in terms of their education quality. They are last place. Edict there in that state that now every school, they will teach from the Bible. They're picking their own branch of Christianity, their version, and they're going to now, that is going to substitute for actual education. And these same schools are slashing preschool. They're letting women go hungry. They're letting women die in childbirth. Texas has an increased child mortality rate because of abortion bans. This is already happening, Sherilyn, because they know that Samuel Alito is with them and that this majority will affirm merging church and state. That's the fight, right?
It's true, and that's why I don't understand why the number one conversation is not the Supreme Court, because no matter what any Democrat does, no matter what, even if Joe Biden is elected, he does, this Supreme Court has made clear what they will do. And so that means that when we look at this election, we have to be looking at having the House and the Senate, because Supreme Court reform has to be the first order of business. Otherwise, no other progressive things that people want will be able to go forward, because the court has made clear who they are and whose they are.
The difference between Democrats and Republicans is Republicans, they get a felon and an adjudicated rapist and they triple down. Democrats go, oh my God, and try to do whatever it takes to kind of make themselves lose. Focus, everyone. You need to win more seats. You need the House, the Senate, and the White House, because yesterday Michael Steele told us that he's already hearing they're going to put 5 more right-wingers on the Supreme Court if Trump gets in. 5 more Clarence Thomases and Alitos. Sherilyn Ifill, my friend, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Joy.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.